Shavua Tov, my friends. I hope you're all doing very well and you had a nice Shabbat. Tonight we're going to be beginning a new set of laws. We're going to be studying the laws of idol worship, the laws of avodat kochavim, of serving idols. And over here, the Rambam is going to be teaching us a whole new topic of laws where we're going to be studying all about this. So in the Torah, there are actually 51 commandments in regards to not serving idols. And that's a lot of commandments in comparison to the 613. 51 of these are discussing the idea of idol worship. The idea of belief in God is such a strong fundamental in Judaism that it takes up a lot of mitzvot discussing why we are not allowed to do anything besides that. So over here, the Rambam actually lists out, right at the beginning of the laws, he lists out all these 51 commandments. 2 of them are positive commandments of things that we're supposed to do to those who do serve idols. And 49 are negative commandments telling us what we are not allowed to do, what forms of idol worship we're not allowed to do, beginning by telling us how we're not allowed to show any interest in worship of false gods. We're not allowed to stray after our thoughts, of our heart, of our eyes. We're not allowed to curse God. We're not allowed to bow down to any idols, etc. All the way till the end, where he tells us various actions and ways and styles of what idol worshippers do. For instance, we're not allowed to get a tattoo. It's a form of idol worship. We're not allowed to take certain haircuts, where we cut off our peyot on the sides of our head, which is the style of what idol worshippers would do, etc. So there are many commandments in regards to this, and here the Rambam lists everything in, and if you want you can open up a Rambam and see exactly the laws in their detail. But let us begin by beginning the chapter, today chapter 1 of the laws of idol worship, where the Rambam actually is going to give us a historical overview of how idol worship began. How is this possible? We have the first creation, the first man and woman, Adam and Eve. They're created by the hands of God, and they obviously believe in God. And then, at some point, in the middle of the way, people started believing in idols, and they started worshiping them. All the way up till Abraham, as we're going to be seeing very soon, that he was the one that recognized God and started to announce God's name to the whole world. So, what went on? How did this all take place? Let us begin. So, in the days of Enosh, who he was one of the descendants of Adam, mankind made a grave mistake. And this is something which was a detrimental mistake, which is affecting us all the way till today. The idea of idol worship. How did this begin? So, Enosh himself was a very smart man, but he himself made this mistake, and they erred in this idea. What did they say? They said, listen, God is so awesome. God is so great. He created so many creations. He created the sun, stars, moon, so many planets, so many creations. These are awesome and big creations. And if God created them, they must be so special. So, if they are so special, so then let us serve them. Let us give them honor. Let us pray to them that they should give us their light and they should give us their blessing, etc. And just as the king would be happy if we give his servants honor, being an expression of honor to the king. So this is what they started to do. And eventually they started to create temples and various buildings in where they were giving honor to these creations, essentially to these stars. They started offering sacrifices to them, and they would glorify them, and so on and so forth. And these were all in the general goal of, they were saying, God is so great, and God created all of these, let us give these honor. Technically, very nice. What's wrong with that? But that was the beginning of veering off from the path of belief in one God. And God is the one who created all of these, and God is the one who we should give any honor and praise for all of the creations, not to the creations themselves, who are only just like an axe in the hand of a woodchopper. God is creating these to give light to the world, but they don't have any free will. They don't have any power whatsoever. It's all coming from God. And this was foolish on their part. As the days continued on and the generations passed on, so then you started having various false prophets who came and said, this and this star or this and this planet spoke to me and told me that we have to build him a temple, or we have to build him a certain place of worship and do certain acts of worship. And he started saying, this star said that we should do this, and that star said that we should do this, and he started creating various forms and shapes and so on, and putting them all over the city, or on the mountains, or on the trees, and people would start going over to these various forms and bowing down to them, and that's how it all continued. And you had all of these various priests and of these houses of worship, so to speak, and they said that if you pray to this God, then you're going to have success over here, and if you go to this, then this is going to happen. And they had all various ways of giving praise and honor, etc., to these various forms. And as the generation went by, and you had these children growing up, and ultimately they had no idea of anything else except for what they were being taught. And they started to serve them, they started to swear in its name. Their life was surrounded around this idol. And eventually the name of God disappeared from most of mankind. And this is how idol worship became something so widespread. Except for certain individuals, as we find in the Torah. For instance, there was an individual called Chanoch, who it says in the Torah that he was someone who followed in the way of God. Or Noach, for instance. He was saved in the flood. He believed in God, etc. And this is how the world continued to go all the way until the pillar of the world, Abraham, was born. Once this mighty man, Abraham, was weaned and he started to grow up, he started to explore and he think, 1 second, what's going on over here? We have the day and we have the night. The sun is during the day, the moon is during the night. How can all of this, the sun come up in the morning, go down in the evening, the moon come up in the evening, go out in the morning, how is all of this turning? Who is controlling all of this? All of this amazing creations that are taking place. And he didn't have any teachers, and no one told him anything. He was over there in the city of Ur Kasdim, which is where he lived. And he was surrounded by many idol worshippers. And he started to think. He started to go out of that zone and area and education that he was brought up with. And he started to think, what is behind all of this creation? And he came to the conclusion that there must be a God. And at that point, God hadn't spoken to him yet. And really, when he came for many years, he came to that conclusion that there must be a God. And he started to speak to people about this. And he started to say that there is only one God who created the whole world. And Abraham the Rambam says he was 40 years old when he recognized his creator in its full sense. And he started to tell people off. Don't serve idols. What are you doing? This is nonsense. And he started to break some idols. And people were getting very upset at him. And there was the big king over there. And he decided he's going to punish him. And he wanted to kill him. But through a miracle, Abraham was saved and he ran away. And then at that point, he started to spread God's name throughout the entire world. He started going from place to place, telling people, believe in God. Stop bowing down to idols. Stop bowing down to the earth on your feet. That's what they were doing. And as it says in the verse, that he called out in the name of God. And he said that God is the creator of the world, and he is the one who gives life to the world. And people started coming and listening to what he has to say. And he had hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of followers, of people who came to study under his guidance. And he wrote books, the Rambam said, explaining this idea of belief in God. And he gave it over to his son Isaac. And he continued and passed this further. And then it came along Jacob, and he passed it on even further. And then he took his son, Jacob's son, Levi, and he set him as the head of the academy of study, that we should have the idea of Torah study and belief in God. This was before the Jewish people became the Jewish people and got the Torah on Mount Sinai. But they already had all of this greatness, and God had already spoken to Abraham, and they knew this for a fact. It wasn't just a speculation that Abraham came to, but rather God had already spoken to him and gave him the 10 tests, etc., as it all explained in the Torah. But the idea is that Abraham started it, and then it continued going on from generation to generation. But what happened? Then the Jewish people went into Egypt. And when they went into Egypt, they came into the Egyptians, and they were all serving idols. And they started learning from them. And the Jewish people were surrounded by the nation of the Egyptians, who were very, very big in idol worship. And slowly, the name of God was starting to get forgotten. Round 2. And generation after generation, the Jewish people were in Egypt for many, many years. 210 years, they were slaves. And slowly, the name of God was being forgotten. And this ideal, this great foundation, and this belief in God that Abraham had rooted within him, within his children, was slowly disappearing. But because of God's great love to us, and because he kept his special covenant that he made with Abraham, God sent Moses, and he was the greatest of all prophets. And he came, and God sent him to take the Jewish people out of Egypt, to go and bring them and tell them that God has picked you, and God wants you to come and believe in him and perform his commandments. And over here, these are the commandments that Moses got from God, telling us what are the fundamentals of what we are not allowed to do in regards to idol worship, and what we're supposed to do with those who do it. And this is what the laws of idol worship in the Rambam is going to be discussing. This is what it's going to be all about. So with that, we have completed the first chapter of Rambam for today. The chapter discussing the history of how idol worship came to be, and essentially how belief in God is such a fundamental in Judaism, that this was essentially why God sent Moses to the Jewish people to redeem them and bring them to Mount Sinai so they can get the Torah, all on this base of our belief in God. I wish you all well, and we will see you all tomorrow morning, God willing. Have a good one.